So, whatever happened to that classic television series with everyone's favorite disheveled yet brilliant mystery detective? Let's find out. Movies,
music, and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. And by the way, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace makes it super easy to create gorgeous websites in no time, but more on that later. You know, when it comes to classic movies and TV shows, I certainly have to admit that I have an awful lot of guilty pleasures. The Omega Man, Kolchak, The Muppet Show, Colossus, Lost in Space, and yes, even H.R. Pufnstuf. However, that being said, the one non-sci-fi adventure TV show that ranks number one on my list of favorites is Peter Falk's Columbo. This show really had an in-depth and interesting backstory, so grab your cigar and your old rumpled raincoat and let's dive in. Wait a minute, hold on, just one more thing. Oh, now that's better. The 1970s and 80s were filled with an enormous amount of American detective shows like Barnaby Jones, Hawaii Five-0, Ironside, McCloud, The Mod Squad, and so many others. We could be here all day. But Columbo, let's just say, was different. Now, for those of you who have never seen an episode of Columbo, which quite frankly would surprise me if you hadn't, Columbo was an American TV series starring Peter Falk as a homicide detective with the Los Angeles Police Department, generally the one investigating the crimes of high-profile, rich and famous people, and despite initially coming across at first as a bit of a disheveled, simple-minded cop on the beat, he always ends up getting his man. Or woman.
This old man, he played one. He played knick-knack on my thumb.
However, one thing that really set this show apart from other mystery shows in the day was the fact that this show popularized the concept of the inverted detective story, sometimes referred to as a how catch 'em, where we know immediately in the first scene who the killer is and how they did it.
No, I think one of the reasons that people enjoy Columbo is that we go into such detail in terms of explaining to the audience exactly how the crime is committed.
But hang on, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, folks. To find out the full history of this classic TV show, we gotta go back, way back to 1960. The character of Columbo was created by the writing team of Richard Levinson and William Link, who said that the character was inspired by a character from Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and G.K. Chesterson's somewhat humble cleric detective Father Brown. The Columbo character first appeared in 1960 in an episode of the television anthology series The Chevy Mystery Show called Enough Rope, and featured a police lieutenant named Columbo, portrayed by actor Bert Freed. Levinson and Link then took this concept and adapted it into a stage play called Prescription Murder, which was first performed at the Curran Theater in San Francisco in January of 1962. But this time it was Oscar-winning character actor Thomas Mitchell playing Columbo, who was about 70 years old at the time, with Joseph Cotton as the murderer and Agnes Moorehead as the victim. Now, jumping forward to 1968, this stage play, Prescription Murder, was then readapted for the NBC network. This is wild, but the writers originally wanted singer Bing Crosby for the role of Columbo, but old Bing turned down the part because, and I quote, playing Columbo would have taken too much time away from his golf game. Okay. The director, Richard Irving, luckily convinced both Levinson and Link that Peter Falk, who was extremely excited about playing the part, could actually pull it off, even though he was a much younger man than the writers initially had in mind. And so it begins, Columbo, starring Peter Falk in this one-off movie of the week, not yet a series, called Prescription Murder, starring Gene Barry as a psychiatrist, pitted against the clumsy genius of Falk's Columbo. This particular movie of the week was so incredibly popular that NBC requested an actual pilot for a potential TV series to basically find out whether or not the audiences would find this character interesting enough for a weekly series, which led to the 1971 90-minute Columbo movie called Ransom for a Dead Man with Lee Grant playing the killer. And again, this movie of the week was enormously popular with both critics and audiences, so NBC wanted a weekly Columbo series. But Peter Falk actually said no. He basically refused to do a weekly show because he felt that he was just too busy doing character parts in Hollywood motion pictures. So, what to do? Well, rather than airing a weekly show, NBC decided to take episodes of Columbo and put them into rotation with other mystery shows from the time, like McCloud and McMillan and Wife, as part of the NBC mystery movie Wheel series, which premiered in September of 1971. This way, audiences would get to enjoy Columbo once a month on Wednesday nights. Peter Falk could continue working in motion pictures, a win-win for both sides, so everybody's happy, right? Well, yeah, I guess so. Columbo was almost an immediate hit in the Nielsen ratings, which made the network executives extremely happy, I can tell you. And Peter Falk won an Emmy Award for his role in the show's first season. It's so funny when I mention the TV show Columbo to people, and they're like, yeah, Columbo, that guy was really dumb. Actually, he was an absolute genius who used his own hometown, somewhat shy, clumsy nature to cleverly get inside the mind of the antagonist, who didn't usually figure that out until it was just a little bit too late.
And it's very important that Columbo never be a show-off. He's got a big brain, but he should never wear it on his sleeve. And it's very important that he appear harmless to the adversary.
Columbo, to me, was cute in a lot of ways. He had a real amazing sense of humor, constantly talking about his wife and his relatives, which to this day I'm not entirely convinced he actually had, but oh man, this guy could be relentless. When Columbo felt that he'd been pushed too far and his temper finally flares, which, by the way, was extremely rare on the show, but holy cow, look out! Those were some of my absolute favorite scenes in the entire series. Such an amazingly simple yet complex character. I really can't get enough of it. I just love it. And then there's the costume. What an amazingly brilliant costume that was. Picked out, apparently, by Peter Falk himself. The shoes, the cigar, the green tie, the wrinkled old raincoat, which, according to Peter Falk, he picked up for $15 one day during a rainstorm in New York City in 1967 and just brought it to the set and said, "This is what I'm wearing."
I thought that I had read in the script that he was wearing a raincoat. Lincoln Levinson, they claimed that it never said a raincoat, that it was a top coat, but that's my memory. And I knew of a raincoat that I wanted to wear, and that was mine. I liked it. I felt comfortable in it. And I also had a pair of shoes that I wanted to wear because they were brown and they had a high top on them, and it looked like something that an immigrant would wear. Drab.
Quite the interesting story about whatever happened to the original Columbo raincoat. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Season 1's first episode, Murder by the Book in 1971, was, believe it or not, directed by an extremely young Steven Spielberg, nearly 4 years before directing the blockbuster Jaws. Actor Patrick McGoohan played a Columbo murderer more times on the show than any other actor, 4 times. Jack Cassidy had 3 appearances on the show as killers, while William Shatner and George Hamilton played the bad guys twice. Peter Falk's second wife, Shira Danesi, ended up in, I believe, 6 episodes between 1976 and 1997. Now, Peter Falk himself did, in fact, direct just 1 episode of Columbo, Blueprint for Murder, I believe, in 1971, although rumor has it that he was also largely responsible for directing the episode Etude in Black in 1972. I know what a lot of my favorite episodes were, but what were some of Peter Falk's favorite episodes? Well, according to Falk himself, some of his absolute favorites were Any Old Port in a Storm with Donald Pleasance, Forgotten Lady, Now You See Him, and Identity Crisis. In 1999, TV Guide ranked Lieutenant Columbo himself number 7 on its list of the greatest TV characters of all time. Columbo, such a strange and unusual name, but I know what you're thinking. What's his first name? And I know that's been keeping a lot of you up at night, so even though it's never revealed in the show itself, there is one close-up shot of his badge in Season 1, which clearly shows the name as Frank Columbo. Yeah, I guess that's okay. The first time we ever saw the adorable and somewhat annoying Basset Hound was in the 1972 episode Etude in Black, and the dog's name? Well, it's Dog. That's it. Just Dog. And Columbo always got his man, right? Well, every time except one time. Just once in the entire series did Columbo actually let a killer get away with murder, but the circumstances were actually quite unusual, and the way this particular scene plays out is one of my absolute favorite dramatic segments from the entire series. In the episode Forgotten Lady, a terminally ill woman named Grace Wheeler and played by Janet Leigh, with only a very short amount of time left to live, simply can't remember that she even committed the crime. Sad, but very, very interesting show to watch play out. Definitely one of my favorites. You know, Peter Falk lost one of his eyes to cancer at the very young age of 3 years old, but I always thought it was great the way he would allow the Columbo character to actually acknowledge that fact, like on screen during the show while saying things like, when helping someone else out, you know, 3 eyes are definitely better than 1, or I'm definitely gonna keep an eye on you. And the guest stars, holy Jiminy Christmas, did this show have a ton of guest stars. Pretty much everybody who was anybody in Hollywood eventually ended up killing somebody on Columbo. All right, this is only a partial list, but here we go. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, Anne Francis, George Hamilton, Leslie Nielsen, Dick Van Dyke, Jack Cassidy, Patrick McGoohan, Eddie Albert, Suzanne Plachette, Don Amici, Pat Morita, Valerie Harper, Martin Landau, Julie Newmar, Vincent Price, Jackie Cooper, Johnny Cash, Robert Vaughn, Janet Leigh, Maurice Evans, Ricardo Montalban, Kim Cattrall, Kim Hunter, Jeff Goldblum's 5-second first appearance on network television, Robert Culp, Donald Pleasance, a very young Martin Sheen, Patrick O'Neill, Lee Grant, Ross Martin, Richard Basehart, Robert Conrad, Roddy McDowell, who was strangely wearing the exact same shirt that he wore in the pilot episode of Night Gallery, Joyce Van Patten, Dabney Coleman, Rip Torn, Walter Koenig, Little Richard Faye Dunaway, George went, a very brief appearance by a young Jamie Lee Curtis, and the list just goes on and on and on. Simply an unbelievable list of guest stars for this amazing show. You know, I'm pretty sure if Columbo was around today, he'd definitely have his own detective website, probably something like rumpledraincoat.com. But if you've ever thought about it, you know, having your own website to promote a brand, sell a product, anything really, well, Squarespace is a freaking awesome company to help you do just that. Super quick, super simple. One thing that makes it so easy is a brand new guided design system called Squarespace Blueprint. You can choose from super professional looking layouts, then personalize them to your own needs, automatically optimized for every device. And if you're selling something, it's even easier with tons of really powerful payment tools where you can accept credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, making checkout seamless and simple. You can upload your own video content to your own video library, sell exclusive content like memberships, courses, music, or ebooks, purchase the domain and launch your very own website all in no time, all in one place. It's super simple, super convenient. Simply check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and even better, you can save 10% off your first purchase of a domain or website by visiting squarespace.com/Dan Monroe. So yeah, Squarespace. Give them a try. I'm working on a new site right now with these guys, maybe called justonemorething.com. Okay, back to Columbo. Yes, the list of guest stars on the show was remarkable, but don't forget the coolest guest star of all, of course, Robbie the Robot. For the episode Mind Over Mayhem, the producers wanted a robot for the show, and who's the most famous robot of all? Well, Robbie the Robot, of course. However, at the time, the original Robbie the Robot was still on display at Movie World Museum, but luckily a guy named Bill Malone had just finished building his very own Robbie the Robot replica, so Robbie came in for the audition and got the job. There was one minor issue, however. Robbie was very tall, and the producers thought he might just overshadow the shorter Peter Falk and steal every scene. So they removed Robbie's legs and put him in that weird wheelchair-looking kind of thing to roll around in. As you probably know, Robbie made a ton of appearances on TV shows in the 70s and 80s, but it was the replica, not the original. I've already done a big deep dive video all about Robbie the Robot. Check it out. Link in the description. One of the many staples in the entire series was, of course, Columbo's car, which was in reality a French 1960, although some say 1959, Peugeot 403 convertible, which always literally looked like it was not going to make it even one more mile, but man, did Columbo love that car. It's a classic. It's French. Really kind of an interesting story. Early on, while the episode Death Lends a Hand was in the planning stages, Levinson and Link came up with the idea that Columbo should have some kind of dilapidated car to fit his personality. Strange, but Peter Falk didn't like that idea at all at first because he figured he already had his wife, his cigar, his raincoat, and that was enough. He just didn't want any more gimmicks. But Mr. Falk eventually went down to the Universal back lot and looked around at cars. Nothing really stuck out to him until literally the day before they were to begin filming. He said, and I quote, "I just saw the nose of a car sticking out and it didn't run. It didn't even have an engine, but I knew that was the one." And where is this iconic car today? Well, hang on. We'll get to that. Well, the Columbo TV series came and the Columbo TV series went, but that definitely wasn't the end of this unbelievably iconic character. Peter Falk was earning around $300,000 per episode when he returned for season 6 of Columbo, but in 1976, this literally doubled to over $600,000 per episode when the series made its comeback in 1989. Okay, Columbo was a little bit older, but in my opinion, these episodes were some of the absolute very best. I'm planning on doing another video all about the second, later Columbo series in the near future, so stay tuned for that. Peter Falk won a total of 4 Emmy Awards for his portrayal of Lieutenant Columbo in 1972, 75, 76, and again in 1990. And by the way, if you ever happen to be wandering through the streets of Budapest, Hungary, there's an enormous life-size bronze statue of Columbo and his dog that was unveiled in 2014, costing upwards of $60,000. Okay, but what about all the remakes, reboots, and God help us, reimaginings? Well, in 1979, there was an extremely short-lived spin-off TV series called Mrs. Columbo, which was really not very good at all and was almost immediately canceled after only 13 episodes. Sorry, you can't do Columbo without Peter Falk. Impossible. Other than that, thank God, nothing. Look, in my opinion, there are just certain characters in cinematic and television history that should never, ever be touched by anyone else. Humphrey Bogart's Rick from Casablanca, Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones, and Peter Falk's Columbo. For God's sakes, just leave them alone. However, and I guess this is kind of cool for all you Battlestar Galactica and A-Team fans, in 2010, the original Columbo play, Prescription Murder, was revived for a tour in the United Kingdom starring Dirk Benedict as Columbo. I don't know. Maybe. Okay, but whatever happened to all those super cool costumes and vehicles from the show? Well, as far as the famous Columbo car went, that right there is an unbelievably complex question, depending on who you ask, and is such an enormous topic and highly debated that I'm planning to do an entire video very soon specifically and only about what happened to the Columbo car or cars. But as a sneak peek, here is a really super cool photo of one of the original Columbo cars today, which does still exist, so stay tuned for that deep dive video coming soon. And the coat, the iconic Columbo raincoat, well, folks, this is one of those subjects that people will argue about non-stop on websites and blogs for years to come, so I'm simply going to give my opinion along with all the information I've uncovered about this more or less unique costume piece. According to Falk himself, when the NBC run of Columbo ended in 1978, he took his original raincoat back to his Beverly Hills home and just put it in a closet. And I know it's so fun and nostalgic to think that there was only one coat, but in my opinion, when it comes to Hollywood, there is rarely just one of anything. A TV Guide article from 1974 clearly shows and explains how multiple raincoats were artificially aged in order to make sure that there was a healthy stock of raincoats available on the set. I mean, take a look. There's a whole freaking rack of them. So there you go. However, in November 2017, one of Columbo's coats, along with a pair of shoes, went on the auction block with an estimated selling price of $120,000, but didn't sell. In June 2018, the same coat and the shoes went up for auction again at Bonham's Auctions, this time with a estimated sale price of a lower 30 to 50 grand, but again, from what I understand, didn't sell. Another one of Columbo's coats, along with basically the entire costume, minus the shoes, mismatched pieces, by the way, because the tags on the individual clothing pieces and the raincoat didn't match, went up for auction in December 2019 and reached a high bid of 18 grand. But the owners thought that that was just way too low, so again, never sold. You know, it's really too bad. I would have just loved to have walked up to the winning bidder just to be able to say, I just gotta know, what did you pay for those shoes? There surprisingly wasn't a lot of Columbo memorabilia out there back in the day other than maybe the Columbo board game. There were some novelizations of several of the movies and episodes, but other than that, I really couldn't find too much. If I missed anything, let me know. I was so excited when I heard that back in 2011, the complete 10-season set taken from high-definition masters in the original 4:3 aspect ratio was being released on Blu-ray in an enormous 35-disc set presented inside this cool wooden cigar box until I quickly found out it looked like it was only released in Japan and was so freaking expensive there was no way to even consider it. However, luckily in December of 2023, the first 7 seasons of Columbo was released in glorious high definition and at a fairly reasonable price point, and man, do these shows look gorgeous. As of yesterday, Tuesday, July 16th, 2024, Columbo: The Return is now available, which contains the final 24 episodes in the series, remastered in 4K and released here in glorious Blu-ray high definition. Add to cart. Now, for those of you who want an even deeper dive into this amazing series, I highly recommend checking out the Columbo File blog website, which contains not only a ton of information on the show, but just about everything you could possibly ever want to know for the pure Columbo enthusiast. Check it out. Link in the description. Columbo not only remains one of the most beloved characters in TV history, but, and still to this day, remains one of the most popular detective crime drama shows ever to grace TV screens across the world, literally paving the way for other classic crime shows in years to come like Father Dowling Mysteries, In the Heat of the Night, Law and Order, Matlock, Murder, She Wrote, NYPD Blue, Twin Peaks, Walker, Texas Ranger, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into the world of Columbo, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole ton of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we continue together the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.